We ended up going until I think well past 8 o'clock. Thank you, Carrie, for being on the ball, even though I didn't tell you to hit record. So yeah, we're going to try to see if we can get things done so we can get you back to your family time and such by 7:30. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and the first item on the agenda is status of statewide healthcare negotiations. So Carrie, I will ask you to put a pause on the recording for now. That was quick. Awesome. All right. So with that, we're going to move on to the next agenda item, and that is an update on the regional meetings. And I guess I will start by handing it over to Sue.
Thank you very much, Neil. So as you all know, the regional meetings begin this week. The first 3 are tomorrow night. And the agenda includes each region's business meeting with election of a regional representative to this board. And then we're also going to have a presentation by Secretary French on the AOE's fall 2021 COVID-19 recommendations and response. He's also going to talk a little bit about some possible future policy initiatives. And then we're going to have an update from the employer commissioners on the statewide bargaining. And they won't all be at every single regional meeting. They've sort of split it up, but they all are coming to tomorrow night's meeting. Tomorrow night, we have the 3 regions meeting are Eastern Chittenden, Western Chittenden, and Franklin/Grand Isle. We wanted to let all of you know that if you are not up for election this year in your region, we are asking you to run the business meeting for your region, and we will provide you with a script to follow as closely or as loosely as you would like, but we will email you that script. So I'll be emailing the 3 people who will be running tomorrow night's meetings. So tomorrow night we have Kim Gleason will run the Eastern Chittenden meeting. Colleen McKinnon is running for re-election. Neil, I believe, is going to run the Western Chittenden meeting because Jeremy Metcalf is unable to be there to run the meeting. And Jeremy, if anything changes, I'll send you the script too, so that you could run it if you are able to be there. And there is an unfilled vacancy in Western Chittenden. We haven't been able to convince anyone to run yet. But maybe there'll be somebody that steps up at the regional meeting and decides to run. And then Don Collins is going to run the Franklin Grand Isle meeting, and Tara Sweet is running for re-election. And we'll have a staff person with you in each of those breakout rooms to take minutes of your meeting. So moving on to September 14th, Jim Salzgiver is going to run the Bennington regional meeting, and David Chandler is running for re-election. On September 21st, Kevin Amiot is running the Kingdom North meeting, and Gaston is up for re-election. And Mark Clough is running the Kingdom South meeting. Judy Murray's not running again, so there's a space there that needs to be filled. On September 23rd, Adrian Raymond is running the Rutland meeting. George Gonda is not returning, so there's a space there. And Dave Sharp will be running the Addison meeting. Lori Childers is not returning, so there's a space there as well. Moving on, September 29th, Mark Schauber will run the Wyndham meeting. Dan MacArthur is up for re-election, and Amy McMullen will run the Windsor meeting. Nancy Russell is up for re-election. And lastly, on October 7th, Floor is running the Central Vermont meeting. And Neil, I don't know if you've had a chance to talk to Mark Nielsen. He's willing to continue on the board, but works 2 to 10 p.m. So we'll follow up about that. And the last thing I would say on regional meetings is if you haven't registered yet for your regional meeting, please go to the VSBA website and register for your meeting. Anything else you want to add on regional meetings, Neil?
Just that they're super exciting and really fun to be at. Except
they're all being done on Zoom this year. We're not.
You don't get a sandwich, you don't get a cookie, you don't get a little drink. Jim, go ahead.
I was just curious, when are the sort of packages coming out for each of the meetings? How far in advance?
We normally email it the day before, but we may be able to send it a little bit earlier than that. Now that we have the first one done, we sent the first one today, so it'll be easier now to get.
But I wait until the day before to get everyone who's registered up until the day before, because the names of the registries are in the packet.
True. Right. Thanks for that, Carrie.
Any other questions? Board members, especially those in districts where you know that you have regions where you know you have a vacancy. If you can think of folks, please encourage them to attend. If they've got any questions about serving on the VSBA board, feel free to answer those questions or certainly send them in my direction. I'd be happy to speak with anybody who was interested in serving on the board and wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So.
And if you identify someone who definitely wants to run, please let us know, because we can include that information in the packet.
Yes. So if there are no other questions on the regional meetings, then we're going to move along to VSBA activities related to school reopening. And once again, I'm going to turn it back over to Sue.
Okay, well, we have been fielding questions and providing support to boards around schools reopening this fall, masks, vaccinations, etc. We've been in close touch with the VSA and the VPA on all of these issues. And because there was an absence of guidance from the state, the three associations issued a document with support from Vsba, written by attorney Pietro Lin, that provided information on masking mandates for students, masking mandates for employees, vaccination mandates for employees, and facilities use and mandatory masking. And that document is in your packet. That was sent out to all the school board members in the state. And we followed that up with a request to meet with Governor Scott regarding our concerns about the lack of a statewide approach. We did meet with him, the three presidents and the three executive directors of the three associations, met with him on August 27th, and the presidents of VSBA, VSA, and VPA took the lead in conveying our concerns to the governor. And I have to say that all three of them did a very good job of that. He listened, he asked questions. At his next press conference, the governor did issue a strong statement in support of school boards requiring masks, but he does not seem inclined to issue any type of statewide mandate. He maintains that he would have to reinstate a state of emergency to do that, and he does not want to reinstate a state of emergency. Just to give you the latest, today he announced that all executive branch state employees will need to be vaccinated or be tested at least weekly and wear a mask. He also stated that almost all school districts are requiring masking, and that the AOE Department of Health updated their advisory memo today, recommending that schools should require universal masking for all students and staff when indoors until October 4th. So originally they had said the first 10 days of school, or until your eligible population reaches 80% vaccination. Now they're saying until October 4th, and they're saying after October 4th, masks should no longer be required for all those that are eligible for vaccination when the vaccination rate, which is 2 doses of a 2-dose vaccine among students, is equal to or greater than 80% of the school's eligible population. And he also announced today a school vaccine incentive program. He has directed the Agency of Education to reserve about $2 million in grant dollars for schools that achieve high vaccination rates. And there are apparently going to be benchmarks with corresponding awards as a school reaches higher percentages. So that is the update that I have. We just wanted to let you know what VSBA had been doing on this important topic.
Yeah, and I'll just follow that up with folks, I just it's been a pretty challenging time for some folks in the school reopening bit of things. And I'm hopeful that you guys are doing well. If you want to share how things are going in your own districts, I've got a little bit of time, we can do that. But just wanted to make sure that you were aware that, VSBA and Sue and the entire staff are there to help you if you find it a little bit challenging with the reopening. Although I'm guessing that, by now we're all reopened, so you're actually dealing with just the normal running of your schools at this point. I was very appreciative of our opportunity to meet with the governor. I think it was a good conversation. It maybe didn't end up exactly the way that we had wanted it to, but to have that ability to have that dialogue and to have, VSBA have a voice to be considered in the governor's determination of how to move forward with things was a good thing and greatly appreciated. So, just wanted to make sure that folks knew that we were out there trying to help out and doing what we can, and just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of it. David, I saw your hand up.
Yes, I just want to say that we really appreciate all the work that you guys have done, and it's greatly felt. That document that you included in our packet was full of a lot of really useful information. It seemed very balanced and even-handed as to just where the rubbing points are, what the administrators and superintendents are able to do and what their rights are, the local parentis and all those things. I was very impressed with that because with all the protests going around, there are certain small protests where boards are trying to really oppose the masking mandate. And this document really helps people know that the schools have a right to lock their doors from parents who aren't masked, and they have a right to do quite a number of things. And I found that extremely useful because in the vacuum of the governor not saying things, you need to know what you can do. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Those are your VSBA dues at work there, David. Any other questions or anything that anybody wanted to share about school reopening? Okay. So we're going to move along then and learn a little bit more about the Vermont Community Foundation Equity Grant. And I think with that, I want to turn it over to Sandra, I believe.
Yes, thank you. As you know, we've been working collaboratively with the Vermont Principals Association and the Vermont Superintendents Association over the past couple of years to address bias, equity, and anti-racism within our own associations and more broadly within our membership. The financial support from the Vermont Community Foundation and the Bar Foundation will provide us with the expertise to address a scope of work that we've identified, and I'll highlight those for you. So the scope of work includes curating and developing communication resources for our members, facilitating an inclusive committee around the review of VSBA model policies with an equity and anti-racism lens, providing timely and expert consultation and resources for superintendents and school board chairs, and providing consultation to the associations related to ongoing equity and anti-racism work internally. So those bullet points were developed as a result of a advisory group from representing all three associations, and we sent out a request for proposal. We've gone through the process of vetting those proposals, and today we met with the two consulting firms that we plan to move forward with. And as we begin this work, please be on the lookout for more updates. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sue.
I think you covered it. One thing that I just wanted to let you all know is we have heard from school boards that they really need communications materials on addressing critical race theory. And I think that's going to be one of the first areas that the consultants are going to be working on providing resources for. So we're very much looking forward to getting started with that. And I know that many school board members will appreciate it.
Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, Sandra. This just came to mind, should have come to mind earlier, but there are a lot of school districts around the state who are doing a lot of work on equity right now. You know, in our district, David, my district, we've hired outside consultants to help with an equity audit and all that. Would it make sense for the VSBA to kind of, to have the information on what's going on in districts around the state to be a part of, a part of your whole program?
It's an interesting thought. Do you think folks would be open to a survey? Quick, we could do a very brief survey.
I would think they would be, and I for in our district, we can share, some of the things we're doing and who we hired. So, other people can, I think it's that collective information is valuable, I would think. Yeah.
We need to talk more about that.
Yeah, sorry, didn't mean to jump in. Gaston, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Sandra. I can't tell you how excited I am about this project. I mean, we desperately need something like this in the Northeast Kingdom. And therein is my point. I've been to 2 critical race theory events, if you will, that were moderated by Senator Ross Ingalls. I was at the event where one of our local representatives got up and said, his "I'm glad I was born white" statement, and my jaw just about dropped to the floor. That being said, one of the key things that I worry about when we start talking about critical race theory is simply this. When you're trying to present, valid information, the opposition will tell you that what you're saying isn't real. So the issue becomes, how do you educate when the very people you are trying to educate are telling you that what you're educating from isn't real, valid, or, it's crazy. But that's where the argument sort of seems to get down to, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's very, very frustrating. Over. So I'm excited about this. Over.
Yeah, thanks for that. I would just say the amount of dialogue and deep contemplation we've had about moving forward with this work has been incredible. And exactly what you just described is the main reason why we really felt like we needed to seek outside expertise to help us move through the work.
Any other questions related to our to grant or to the equity work? I haven't been a school board member as long as some other folks that I know, but holy cow, this is a very unique moment in time for school board members. Like, I don't know if y'all ever thought you were going to be this important in your school board lives, but suddenly you are, right? And we hope that we can give you the resources and the tools that you need in order to be able to do a good and effective job. And for things like this, please reach out. If there are areas in particular that you think that we could be helping with, certainly we can feed that back into this group and the equity work to make sure that you all feel like you're getting the support that you need. Sort of be able to get the work done as well. So I guess a huge thank you to all of you for everything that you're doing. With that, I think the next item up on the agenda is input once again for the pupil weighting factors and the task force. And this time, I believe a particular focus, I think, on VSBA's thoughts position on the excess spending threshold. But I will turn it over to Sue for a little bit more detail on that.
Thank you. Your board packet contains information that the AOE and the Joint Fiscal Office provided to the task force. And VSBA has been asked to provide input to the task force on whether the excess spending threshold should remain in place if and when new weights are implemented per the pupil weighting factors report. So I've included the information, the same information for you that the task force has. And you don't necessarily need to make a decision tonight. If the board feels like it needs more information, I could certainly try to get it. And some of the questions that Neil and I talked about when we were preparing for this agenda item was, what was the original intent of the excess spending threshold? Do changes to the weighting factors address that intent? And then there's also the possibility of looking at some kind of moratorium on the excess spending threshold for a certain number of years while new weights are implemented, so that the districts that are going to see higher tax rates will not have sort of a double whammy as it's being implemented. Right now, there is a moratorium on the excess spending threshold for this year and the following year. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Neil, and to facilitate the discussion.
Yeah, so I will say, this is another one of those scenarios where VSBA has been asked to provide testimony and or input to the task force as they go through their work this summer, but the timing on these requests is not always great when it comes to, VSBA and board meetings and such. So while it is on the agenda this evening for discussion and possible decision, I think I'm interested just see how this discussion goes, see where board members might be falling on this issue at the moment, understanding A, that you might not have all of the information, and B, that things that you do have information on may be a little cloudy right now. But maybe I'll just set it out there. I will not be entirely upset if we can't come to a motion and a vote on something tonight. I think the discussion and the things that are discussed during the meeting will also be helpful for Sue for future testimony for the task force as well too. But with that, I will turn to Colleen.
Yes, I'll just share our own experience. Champlain Valley School District, it's one of the largest districts in the state now, but before consolidation, we were 6 separate districts that had very different populations, and enrollment fluctuations had a far greater impact on the smaller districts. And so we struggled with maintaining below the threshold, particularly for the smaller districts. So just from that experience, now we're not really concerned about the excess spending threshold just because we're a much larger district. A larger district can absorb change in enrollment so much more easily than small districts. And so I would be in favor of a moratorium or some kind of hold harmless, just to let things play themselves out, because I think that the threshold will have the greatest burden for the smallest districts. That's my guess.
Thanks
That's
for
all.
that. Yep, no, thanks for that, Colleen. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you, Colleen. Yeah, we're one of the smaller districts, and we have the double whammy of actually being pre-K to 6, and then we tuition out 8 to 12. And so, you can start putting a bunch of rules into place on how you apply the excess spending threshold. So I think where I'm getting on this is when you're doing these weightings in the study, you're just doing an add-on, and I don't think that meets the flavor or the intent of the weighting study. And it's just a catch-all at the end to deal with really the small districts that just can't absorb these costs as we try to grow our census, et cetera, et cetera. In full disclosure, I'll be testifying at the next meeting on small districts and the burden of the excess spending threshold when we're really not doing anything wrong and the actual dollars spent to the system are very small. So that's what I have.
Thanks, Mark. Anybody else with input on topic? Jeremy, go ahead.
Thank you. What is the weighting measuring? Is the weighting measuring the total education per equalized pupil? Then you're either over or under per pupil. I guess I'm having a trouble understanding what that overweight, underweight represents. Just someone that.
Oh, from the presentation that we're showing on the screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that this, the overweight, underweight is in reference to the equalized pupil count for that district based on the proposed new weights. Is that correct, Sue?
I think, yeah, it has to do with how they would be impacted. But we could certainly have, this document is, I'd have to look and see whether this was, I can't remember if this came from AOE or JFO. They each did one of these documents. It may say at the top. But we could have someone come in and go through this with you, or you could watch the task force, the recording of their last meeting, because they went through this document at that time.
Yeah, and then I guess I'll have to go watch, because this is this done in a vacuum, or like your CLA, all the things that go into your equalized pupil rate. There's a lot of different factors in there.
Yeah, I don't think it would take into account your CLA, but
yeah, so I think
I would need to look at it more carefully.
Yeah, so I think what you're looking at here is just the equalized pupil calculation. The CLA would come in then when you're actually doing that final tax rate calculation. So I think what you're seeing here would be independent of any changes in the CLA.
Neil and Sue.
Yep, go ahead, Don.
Mark Corral, I think most of us know Mark. Sue, you certainly work with him. He was very instrumental. Janet Ansel was chair of House Education. Gay Symington was the speaker, and I worked with him from the Senate. And I think they served a purpose at one time, but I think there's something that probably have outlived their goal or life expectancy. But I think if we wanted to get some information, Mark would be a really good source to take and give maybe a little history and how it impacts. And from what little I know about it with weighting and everything, I would say we should certainly support a moratorium on the excess spending penalties.
Thank you, Don. Any other comments, inputs? Is there anybody here who would just really love to see the excess spending threshold stay in place? I'm not seeing anybody jump up and down unless Kim wants to say something.
No, I guess I would. No, I am not dying to have it stay in place. I think it came about for a reason. So I think a moratorium in the face of changing weights and other things would be important. I think a consideration of the original purpose and the subsequent impact of merger, for instance, or unification across districts. And I think it was sort of intended to motivate people to see if they could collaborate and unify in a way that didn't put them as fragile to a family moving in or out of a district, and the way it was experienced for Westford, for instance, with Essex Westford, and the way Colleen described it. So again, I think in this time, for this purpose, it's important that it take a rest while we figure out the impact of all these other moving pieces. But I would imagine, I don't think we would want to come out and say it just needs to go away forever.
Thanks. Don, did you have anything else? No. Don, I'm getting a lot of background noise, so if you wouldn't mind muting, that would be awesome.
I was going to chime in briefly, though, to say that certainly you know, it was set up to try to work on leveling the playing field. But I think the big thing is it was a compromise. We had a Republican governor who was well liked by most citizens in the state, thought we were spending too much money in schools. And we had a Speaker of the House and a President Pro Tem who were Democrats and felt that schools were spending their money wisely. So again, I go back to what I said earlier. I think it's outlived its purpose. It's time to go away.
Thank you for that. So I'm kind of think we're starting to form some consensus around maybe a possible motion on this. And I'm wondering if something along the lines of the VSBA would support a suspension of the excess spending threshold during the implementation phase of the weighting study, and then would recommend a review of the reinstatement of that post-implementation of the weighting study. Jim, you had your hand up?
Yeah, one, I would either make that motion or second that motion, whichever is required. But I also just wanted to point out one thing on the, since Jeremy had asked about the underweight, overweight, one thing to note on that, you know, I found it rather confusing at first because the overweight and underweight seem to be actually the opposite of what's normally being discussed in the task force. Those that are designated as underweight are most of the time, those are the people who have been considered overweight. And that's basically, it's just a matter of the overweight, underweight is if the new weights came in, then would your taxes be going up or be going down? And it's basically been the overweight districts that would have a tax increase from the new weights, and the underweight districts would have a tax advantage. But in that schedule, it's reflected the opposite way. So.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out.
Thanks, Ed. Oh, I'll second if Jim moved.
Let me back up then. Jim, did you want to make a motion?
I will make a motion that the VSBA board decide to support the suspension of the excess spending threshold for the time being, subject to reconsideration later, you know, at a later date. But under current circumstances, we would support a suspension of the excess spending threshold.
I'll second.
Okay.
I don't know if those words are exactly what Neil has said, but I think the sentiment is that we support it during implementation and the reviews following implementation.
Yep.
So I second that.
And
Harry got all that.
And if that's an amendment, I accept the amendment of the motion. Yeah.
I think it was what you were saying, and I think it was what Neil said. And so
No,
I don't think it's an amendment.
I can tell you. I can tell you what I
clarified, that's
have.
good.
You tell me if this is this the motion. VSBA would support suspension of the excess spending threshold during implementation of the weighting study, and then would recommend a review before reinstatement of the excess spending threshold. Okay.
All right. So I have, now that Sue's got the motion language all set, when the motion came from Jim, it was seconded by Kim. Is there any discussion on this? Mark, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I would say, Sue said support. I would say it's recommend a moratorium, a temporary moratorium or short-term moratorium, because she had said support, and I don't know that anybody's proposing it. So I think we need to initiate it and say recommend.
Okay. Hang on one second. Sue, can you reread the motion for me again? Or see if you could, if you've got it written down, if you could dump it in the chat so I could take a look at it.
I'll put it in the chat. I'm gonna have to write it because I just wrote it down on a piece of paper. So hold on.
I actually have it, Sue.
Oh,
This
okay,
is
great.
Susan, so
Thank
I
you,
will put it in there. I think I captured the language.
And before I go to Colleen, though, I want to just check and see if Mark, are you actually proposing an amendment to the motion?
I guess I am, yes.
Okay.
I don't know. Did Jim say support or recommend? I'm not sure.
I said support, but that's because I think that the task force is now considering and discussing this particular topic. So, but I just thought, our supporting was adequate because it's, it's being considered by the task force now. But I'm
So-
happy with recommend too, that's fine.
Well, let me say, so Mark, you see the motions in the chat. Would you still want to make a propose an amendment?
I feel that it needs to be recommend. They're kicking it around. I think recommend is the better phrase
Okay.
myself.
So you want to strike the word supports and put recommends? Okay, so we have that amendment. Is there a second for the amendment? Seconded by Kim. All right, any discussion on the amendment? All right, all those in favor of striking supports and replacing it with recommends in the current motion,
I
just raise
see-
your hand.
I saw Colleen's hand up.
Yeah, I know, but I want to make sure I took care of the amendment first before I,
Okay.
because Mark had jumped in with the amendment before Colleen had raised her hand. At least I'm hoping that that's what happened. All right, so now we've got that. Now I'm going to go back to discussion of the motion as amended. And Colleen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it's just timeline that's off for me. During the implementation of the waiting study, I mean, we're in a waiting study and there might be action taken after the waiting study. So I'm just questioning during implementation of the waiting study seems a short amount of time. But maybe that's all inclusive, that there's some legislation or some action that comes out of the waiting study that we would want to wait until after the results, or
So my
I might be doing
understanding,
too much wordsmithing.
yeah, so let me see if this helps. So my understanding is right. So the actual waiting study, that's done, right? So that work's completed, the waiting study's out there, and what the task force is working on right now is how to implement that. And we do know from some previous discussions that it looks like the implementation, it's likely to occur in a phased approach. So it may not just be in 1 year, everybody's getting new weights and then we're done. It looks like it might be phased in over time. And so I think that that's why we were talking about during the implementation of the waiting study. And that once the study then is fully implemented, then you can go back and then have a review about a potential reinstatement of the excess spending threshold, but we're not suggesting that it automatically go back into effect after the implementation is complete. Is that making sense?
Yeah, I just assumed that Tammy's study was close to complete, although there's a second phase of it. So, and I haven't read recent legislation or updates. It's just a matter of semantics. I think this is fine, gets the point across. I'm good with it.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion as amended?
I think the review after the recommendation for it's important because at that time we find with things like maintenance of effort or otherwise districts that had been overweighted becoming underweighted and needing to meet their federal special ed requirements through maintenance of effort would be pushing up against things they might not have anticipated. So I think it would, I appreciate the way it's worded, that it doesn't automatically drop back, but is recommending a review at that time.
Okay. And before I call for a vote, just maybe a check-in, Sue, would the motion as it's currently worded, do you think that this provides you, sufficient direction, but then also enough leeway for testimony?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, then all of those in favor of the motion as amended, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you, board. So with that, I am going to move on to our Act One working group's proposed changes to ed quality standards. There's info, I believe, in the packet, but I do want to turn it over to Sue for some more explanation on this.
Thank you. So the Act One work group is in the process of recommending some updates to the Vermont educational quality standards. We, for short, we call those the EQS, and those were last revised in 2014. The working group's goal is to submit a comprehensive set of EQS recommendations to the Vermont State Board of Education before the end of this calendar year. And their objective is for the language of the EQS to reflect and advance a culturally responsive, anti-racist, and socially inclusive vision for Vermont public schools. They're inviting the VSBA and other stakeholders to provide feedback on the revisions to the EQS. Those revisions are in your packet. The Act One work group's next meeting is on September 22nd at 12:30. At that meeting, they're going to review the draft that's in your packet and answer any questions. And then on October 22nd, they're going to meet and they're going to vote on the proposed changes. We have a representative on that working group. It is Heather Lynn, attorney Heather Lynn. And if you have a representative on that group, they are expecting basically that you are going to support the changes. So it's really important for if there are any changes that we'd like to see, it's very important for us to give input early on in the process, which would be coming up right soon here, as I just talked about those dates. So I think what we were hoping is that perhaps a committee could be formed to review those changes. And with that, I'll give it back to you, Neil.
Yeah, so for board members' benefit here, this not ideal maybe how they were looking to address this, but basically they were saying if your representative doesn't have any objection to this, that we're going to assume that you all support this. And so with our board's frequency of meeting, it puts us in a little bit of an awkward position to be able to say that my entire board has supported this. I had a discussion with Sue, and one of the things that I think might work out best for us is to peel this review off to a subcommittee of this board. If I could find a few folks that would be interested in doing that, basically to review the changes that are being proposed here and to provide some feedback. And because of the tight timelines on this and when they were looking for a response back from the organizations that are participating in this, my suggestion is either that we authorize the subcommittee to review and provide those recommendations directly back to our representative to bring back to the group as the position of the VSBA, or alternatively, we could have the subcommittee, bring the recommendations perhaps back to the executive committee, because it's a smaller group, and I can pull together the executive committee, on a special meeting basis if necessary. But I believe, given the nature of this work being that this is not necessarily the final version, because this still needs to go before the State Board of Ed, correct, Sue? So this is just the recommendation that goes there. It'll go through a public comment period. It possibly will get revised there. So this is not the end of the line for these proposed changes. This is almost, I would say, like the beginning of it. Just checking to see with board members if they're comfortable with the idea that we spin this review work off to a subcommittee and then have the subcommittee just be the one that provides the VSBA position on behalf of the full board. Is anybody opposed to that approach? Okay, I'm not seeing that. And I will also note for board members, in case you were paying attention, I asked Kim to step away for this portion of the discussion since she is on the State Board of Education, is going to be seeing this in her role there. So she is not privy to the discussion that we're having at the moment. And then I can just call her back when we are done with this. So what I can do with board members is that we do have some, hang on one second, we do have some model motion language that I could share with folks. If somebody was so inclined, to make that motion. So if you hang on for 1 second, I can drop it in the chat. Hang on, almost there. So I believe that could be a potential motion to handle this. If folks review that, and if somebody thought that that matched what they might be thinking about a motion, if they were willing to provide a motion, we could discuss it.
I wonder, Neil, if you could put in the dates to report out to whom and by a date or something like that.
Do we know those dates, Sue?
The Act One working group is meeting on October 22nd, and that would be the date, the deadline, I think. Yeah, I think they would also probably take some comments when they meet on the other date that I said, which is in September. Just a moment. September 22nd. Oh, it's September 22nd and October 22nd, I believe, are the two dates that they're meeting.
All right, so if I was going to maybe add a little bit of clarity to this motion and some dates, that the subcommittee would review and provide feedback to the Act One work group by the September 22nd date. That seems pretty, that doesn't give us much time.
No, I think I would say the October 22nd date, because they're going to vote on it on October 22nd. So you'd probably want to put the later date, I think. And then you could still do it on September 22nd. It would still be within the window, but it'd probably be better to go with the later date.
All right. I put a proposed change in the chat. We don't have a motion yet, but let me go to Jim.
Yeah, I was just, with this group seems to be looking for some, hard and fast input, but we're actually providing, as you put in your motion language, we're providing feedback rather than a hard and fast position. I take it.
Well, I think the feedback could be, it could range from, we think X, Y, and Z should be changed, or we're completely happy with it and support it. Probably that could all encompass feedback.
Yeah, I think, Jim, in this case, we're looking to give this committee enough leeway to sort of provide that review and feedback as appropriate without maybe directing them too much to what they had to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my recollection is this group, they said if you're involved in the process, then you're totally signed on to our final form. And, that could be a little concerning if we provide feedback, they come out with whatever they want and they say the VSBA supports this,
Yeah, I understand the concerns. I think I still, I'm hoping that by providing, the difficulty of this is we don't know what the end state of this document is going to look like at this stage, right? And so to be able to say that we're authorizing this committee to either provide full support or no support from the VSBA to this document seems a little awkward. Whereas, and I think I want to be able to have the VSBA provide some feedback. I will say that I think the request makes it a little bit difficult in how we respond to this. And I'm trying to make sure that VSBA has a voice in this going forward. And so at the very least, at the end of the day, I could say that the subcommittee made the following recommendations to this group. And if this group is then in turn saying that, you know, our changes were not incorporated or agreed to, but yet are insisting that the VSBA then ultimately supported it, I can go back to committee work and votes by this board to indicate that that may not necessarily have been the case, right? Colleen, go ahead.
Yeah, just one piece. I'm wondering if we or the committee brings back information to the full VSBA board at the next VSBA meeting. Maybe if there's, maybe that's an option. But when I read through this, I was thinking through the lens of, well, what are the policy implementation pieces that are challenging, problematic, and, you know, overall, I thought they did a good job of bringing contemporary language into the EQS proposed updates, but there were some problematic areas related to policy, for example. And I just share from our own school district, we've been trying to do a mapping of an equity policy that we adopted a year ago to our other policies. And that is a huge amount of work that's extremely time consuming and not feasible to do in a short amount of time. So I was just thinking that any board members that participate in this kind of review go at the work with the lens of, well, what does it mean for a board day to day, the work of a board, just from that perspective.
Yeah, and I will admit that Sue and I had a discussion on this earlier this week, and I think that was exactly the approach that I thought would make sense in this case as well too. So thank you for that, Colleen. Sounds like at least you and I are on the same page on this.
Yeah, and the other follow-up I would have for Colleen is just a reminder that the VSBA board doesn't meet in October, and that's why we're having this discussion.
Right,
because
I
we would
forgot
bring
about
it back to the board if we could. Yeah.
So we have a potential motion sitting in the chat there. I don't know if anybody else has any other comments or questions, or if someone might think that we might be at the moment where we could entertain a motion.
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion that the VSBA form a committee to review and provide feedback to the Act 1 work group on the Act 1 work group's proposed recommendations for changes to the education quality standards.
And might you be willing to add a date in there, for example, by October 27th?
Yes, and the committee shall provide, you know, that feedback by October 22nd. Sorry. Yep.
No, totally good. Second?
I'll second. Amy.
Seconded by Amy. Any further discussion on this? All right, if there's no further discussion, then we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Nope, I was just scrolling through video, so I just want to make sure I caught everybody. All right. So we're all good with that. And Sue, off the top of my head, I am hoping that the chair has the authority to appoint committee members.
I think you do in some capacity. I'm trying to remember what that is. Hold on. Officers.
Well, if you'd like, I'd be happy to amend the motion to state that the VSBA chair shall appoint members who are willing to serve on the committee.
Okay, hang on one second. Let's see what.
It's not entirely, there's nothing really directly addressing it in the bylaws that I can see, Neil.
Okay, Jim, I think what might actually be easier is just a completely brandy new motion, just authorizing the chair to appoint members to this new committee.
Okay, so I will make a motion. Well, we haven't voted on this one yet, but should.
Oh, no, we did.
We did. Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that the VSBA chair be authorized to appoint people to this new committee to provide feedback to the Act 1 work group.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Nancy, I see. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, then all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. All right, give me 1 second while I let Kim know that she can return. Most importantly, because I need her for the next agenda item.
Yay.
And it sounds like she is back. Kim,
Hi.
financial report.
Cool. Hold on. I'm sorry. Let me get there. Had it up.
No worries. I didn't know that I'd be bringing you right back and then putting you right on the spotlight.
Well, I think we have good news to report. I think it's always helpful to have the board be reassured with our audit report that there are no material modifications that they're recommending. And I felt especially reassured, maybe more so than in other years, since we had such an unusual year, shifting to a 10-month fiscal year. It was nice to see it flush out and pass the mustard. Not that I ever doubt Carrie at all, but it was definitely an unusual set of circumstances with the PPP and the shift to a 10-month year. So I don't know if anybody in reviewing the audit report had any thoughts or questions from what you all saw, and any specific questions either me or Carrie or Sue. I know, Carrie, we were circling back to this lining up with the our income and expense, and the net income does in fact do that. So I don't see that report was in here, but we had that information then last month, and then we had a long agenda and indicated that if there are any questions from that, they might be generated out of the audit report. So I'm open to any questions, and I know that Carrie and I can both pull those if we need to.
Any questions for Kim or Carrie this evening? Not seeing anything. That means you guys did an excellent job here.
Okay.
And now
Clear as mud.
Can we pat ourselves on the back a little bit and congratulate ourselves for adjusting our financial year and getting it all in order and doing it without raising any eyebrows with the auditors?
I'm going to take a deep breath on that one. So yes, I'm appreciative of that being the case. But, I don't imagine there'll be another year more complicated in terms of crafting a budget and working through the nuances of a PPP loan, or, if it could have been unusual, it certainly was. And it seems to have all worked out well. So thank you, Carrie.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. And then we will move on to the VSBA Strategic Plan Monitoring Report. And Sue, do you want to highlight a few things from there?
Yes, I will highlight a few things. Wanted to make sure everyone knows that the resolutions webinar is tomorrow, and Flor and Neil will both be presenting at the webinar, along with Susan will do an intro, and Sandra will be there as well. So encourage everyone to attend, or if you can't, if you still register, you'll get sent a link to it so that you can watch it later. Also wanted to let you know that VSBA is offering a course to school board chairs. It's called Beyond Bias. It was made available to us through the Vermont Principals Association. It's taught through the Center for Creative Leadership, which is the same organization that some of us are doing the Burn Bright course right now. So that is open to 25 school board chairs. We've put it out to all the school board chairs and hoping that we get a full 25 of them to participate in that. I think it's going to be a great course. Sandra's been working hard on model policy review, and we've had, we always have a meeting with the Vsba attorneys after the end of the legislative session to go over changes in the law and what changes we might need in model policies. And we've had the first one, and we have another one coming up next week. So there's a lot going on with review of the model policies. And I guess the last thing I'd end with is just that we're getting a record number of requests for board training. So Susan's been very busy with board training, and definitely some challenging situations that our boards are facing that we're trying to help them out with. So I'll end with that. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. Good to see all of the work that's going on that a lot of us might not see from a day-to-day basis. Any questions from any board members on the monitoring report? All right, not seeing any. I'm going to move on then to the consent agenda, which, as Sue pointed out, mistakenly lists the June and July minutes, but it's really just the August ones. So if the board member would be willing to make a motion. Kim, go ahead.
Moved.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the full motion.
So moved. Was that not enough? Moved.
I think
we
maybe want to
approve the
change that to like
consent agenda?
yeah, that sounds good. That
To
sounds
include the minutes of the August 11th board meeting.
good. All right. Is there a second? Seconded by Amy. All right. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. All right. New business. So I just want to take a minute and talk to you all about the annual conference and the annual meeting. We recently had a conversation with the folks at Lake Maury, and they have agreed to extend the deadline for us to be able to essentially pull out without any financial penalty on this. And I think that they've extended that until October 4th. So we can cancel up until that point in time without, losing any money on this. So the current thinking sort of falls along two different ideas. One is to sort of plan, I shouldn't say sort of, one is to plan for an in-person meeting, including the necessary COVID precautions. The second is to plan for a shorter remote session that would likely include probably just the keynote speaker, since we've already got, I think, that scheduled. But in essence, then not continue with the rest of the conference piece of it. It's just too late in the game to be able to pivot to try to turn what we were planning to be an in-person conference into a remote one. That's not something that we can feasibly pull off at this point in time. The annual meeting, which is the business meeting of this organization, will still go on, and that will occur either in an in-person or a hybrid or a fully remote format. We can figure that out as we get, I think we need to make a final decision on that like 30 days before the annual business meeting. So that will occur regardless. We just have to wait and sort of see how things play out as to what the format's going to be. but I'm a little bit more concerned at this point in time as to what folks are thinking about the annual conference, and particularly what sort of your individual comfort level would be, just to get a temperature of things here about attending an in-person conference. One of the things that we found, if folks remember, so Sue and I were actually scheduled to attend an NSBA conference in person in Kentucky last month. And what ended up happening there is it got closer and closer to the date, and people saw the Delta numbers going up and up in Kentucky. Attendees started to pull out. And at some point, it just didn't make any sense. And so Sue and I had made the decision that we were going to attend remotely. And then I guess enough other attendees made that decision as well, too, that NSBA just pulled the plug on the in-person conference completely. So, one of the calculus for us is going to be, if we just don't have enough people that are willing to attend in person, it just doesn't make financial sense for us to run the annual conference. And so I just wanted to put it out there and see what y'all were thinking about something like this, to just maybe give us a sense as to where we might be headed with this before we have to make a final determination. Feel free to jump in. Susan, go ahead. You're muted though.
Just got that message. Thank you. I just want to also say that in our internal discussions with staff, in case any of you are thinking about a hybrid conference, that is really not a practical approach for us. We just don't have the technology in place, and Lake Maury doesn't have the technology to support doing that. So that's not really going to be an option.
Thanks for that clarification. Mark, go ahead.
I guess I'm thinking that we've asked the students to do this, and the teachers. Could we do a 6-hour meeting without a meal? And of course, it would have to be masked up. So anyway, I'll throw that out for discussion.
Sure. No meal, maybe a beer though. Maybe. What are other folks thinking? I mean, even if it's just a personal opinion on this, we're not going to hold you to it at this stage. I'm just trying to get a sense of what folks are thinking, or what folks might be comfortable with. No, absolutely no judgment here. Kevin, Amiot, go ahead. You got your hand up.
I'd go for remote, please.
Okay. So just to be clear, I think if we are talking the remote option, I think it would really just, Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, it would really just sort of include our keynote speaker.
That's the thought that we developed this week. We basically, since we don't know what's going to happen, we're going forward on 2 different tracks. We're planning for in-person with COVID specific precautions, but we're also developing this backup plan for a shorter remote session with the keynote speaker, and sort of giving ourselves, up until the beginning of October to monitor the situation and see what happens.
Anyone else want to? Amy, go ahead.
So I am attending a statewide town clerks and treasurers conference. Granted, only one day, but it's a 2-day conference that's being held up at Lake Maury at the end of this month. I would feel comfortable going in to a VSBA conference at Lake Maury if it was a little bit shorter, and of course with COVID precautions.
Thanks for that. Jim?
Yeah, just a quick question, and Amy partially answered this. I was curious whether Lake Maury was relatively active with live meetings and how those have been going, or are they, because if they're having meetings almost every week and and results have been good, then that's a useful piece of information.
So this meeting, the one for town clerks and treasurers, has been planned for a couple of months now. they're planning meals and the whole kit caboodle.
Lake Moy's only doing buffet meals right now. They're not, they don't do anything plated at this point. And
Right.
they did mention to us that they're on lower on staff right now. That's why they can only do buffet meals.
Yeah, which we know is not necessarily ideal if you're trying to adhere to COVID precautions.
Have they set it up differently? Do we know, Carrie? Or like it would seem like to do any buffet now, there would have to be different COVID protocols than.
I didn't hear what did they set it up differently? Is that what you
Well,
said?
I just didn't know if in telling us that they were only able to do buffet, knowing that that isn't, you know, the most ideal situation for COVID protocols, have they indicated that they like have it set up with a sneeze guard or whatever? Like, I don't know. Do they?
No, they didn't say anything's any different. I could ask that question, but at this point they haven't said, but you know.
Yeah, we can ask them about that.
Mark Clough, go ahead. Oh, and Kevin, if you could mute your phone, that would be good.
I would just say that the owner of the inn is the chair of the school board in St. Johnsbury district. And they've been pretty good about handling a kind of an unruly public and putting a mask mandate into place. I think Mark is a pretty sharp guy, and full disclosure, he's a customer of mine. They get it, and I think they would do a pretty good job. And I've not heard of any cases among their staff or events to date.
Thanks for that.
Yes, that's one of the reasons why we continue to go there is because he has been on a school board, I think the entire time I've been here. So a long time.
Like I said, there are people out there with longer service than me. So, you know, I mean, I think so. What we'll do is continue to monitor the situation and see how things progress over the next month or so. And obviously won't probably make a decision until we get close to the beginning of October, that deadline date. Colleen, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that some of the national work that I do, the national organizations, they just decided no in-person meetings for the academic year, just because there's just too much up in the air and too much at risk.
Kim, go ahead.
I was just, and you may have said it before, do we have a plan for the
Somehow you got muted, Kim.
It says the host muted me, so there.
Sorry, I clicked the wrong person.
Oh, I thought it was Neil. Thanks, Gary, no worries. I was just going to say that I didn't know if we had already said or if we had decided, would we be able to accommodate a hybrid version of the annual meeting part?
I talked with Sue about that recently. I think we can handle a hybrid version of the business meeting. I'm talking to Sue. I think we can also handle a completely remote version of the business meeting, obviously because we did that last year, but I think you know, we've got even more months of experience under our belt and working in a Zoom platform. So I think we could pull that business meeting off if we had to do it all remote as well.
Neil, what are the superintendents thinking? Because they're usually there part of the time.
Yep.
So yeah, we do the conference with the Superintendents Association, and so all the decisions that and all of our discussions have been with them. So that we basically have made the plan that I talked about earlier about having this 2 tracks, one where we're going ahead to plan for the in-person during
Right.
and then having the other backup plan, and the superintendents are on board with that. Oh, go ahead.
Is there any way to do a survey? Because I would think that many of school board members, if they want to be active, the remote is going to be much easier. I mean, I don't know how difficult it is to survey our membership if they'd even respond. But I just know talking with people here, maybe it's because we've had a high rate recently, people are very cautious to go to anything, even our local meetings, except for last night. But anyway, I guess.
Thanks for that, Don. And so just so folks, just so we're clear here, right? We're talking, the business meeting is a separate thing. The business meeting will happen regardless, and we'll figure out the right format for that based on the conditions on the ground. The annual conference really is a different animal, right? And we're saying that the annual conference could proceed all in person. But if it doesn't proceed all in person, then the only other option there is really just to have, I think, the keynote speaker and maybe some other small bit of it remotely. But there is no bigger sort of conference replacement in a remote or a hybrid fashion. So essentially, just, yeah, consider the conference essentially would be canceled. You'd be able to get to see a keynote speaker, maybe online. And that would sort of, I think, essentially be it.
Thank you.
And I also, there's a financial aspect of this that we have to consider too, right? Is that I don't want the VSBA and the VSA to, run a conference that's going to be so poorly attended that it ends up costing us money rather than making us money. So we want to make sure that we make good use of our VSBA membership dues and such. So
there's nothing, I'm sure, that must not be to the superintendent. Everybody is involved in this together to consider it. I was just thinking, when you said the financial aspect, I was hearkening back to the Vsba opinion regarding school districts and not being covered for communicable diseases. And I'm assuming taking precautions like masking and otherwise would, not run us into challenges with our insurances or otherwise.
Don't know the answer to that question, but maybe, to the extent that we have insurance for these events, I don't know if Sue or you want to look into that, or we don't.
Yeah, I can look into that.
Okay.
Probably overthinking it. I was just thinking about the memo from PHS.
Yep. No, all good points. If you guys have folks and if you have stuff that you want to share about this, but just don't, haven't thought about it at this moment in time, or something comes to you later, feel free to reach out to either Sue or I if you have a position or some thoughts that you think are important to the decision process on this.
I like the surveying idea, but I guess was it Colleen maybe who suggested the idea of surveying? I think we would just want to know how strongly whomever, I forget who said it, I apologize, but how heavily that will weigh in the decision, because we wouldn't want to ask if that isn't, a particularly important piece of the deciding factor.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah, we actually thought about doing a survey, but thought it was a little bit early right now to do it. But it may be better to do it in a couple of weeks.
What was our drop dead date again on the in-person or out of with the
October 4th. October 4th.
Okay.
David, go ahead.
Yeah, Neil, your question or your comment about being cost effective, throwing a party that nobody comes to, what kind of attendance do you need for it to be a kind of break even or be considered worth the effort?
Most of our income comes from the sponsors, but if no one attends, then the sponsors won't be happy.
Good point.
There's not like an actual number we could put up.
And what's the total capacity? Normally you expect 200 people, 250? Or?
Normally, I don't know with COVID placements what our total capacity would be.
Okay.
So yeah, so like I said, we still got some thoughts on this. Go ahead, Gaston.
Yeah, so initially I was sort of leaning towards in person, but piggybacking on David's comment and yours as well with cost effectiveness, honestly, I think people are just tired of what's going on. And I think people are really wanting to be super careful. So I would probably err on going remote and not have in person. That's just my thoughts. Over.
Yep, thank you. Nancy?
So I'm gonna throw a personal comment or two into it. I have multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer. And so I have to be extremely careful about where I go and how many people I am around. So talking with my hematologist and my oncologist, I was talking about, because there's a Rotary conference I'm supposed to be going into too in November. So his suggestion to me is, if at all possible, not to go to them, only because of it's so easy for me to catch something now because my my immune system is so compromised. But, and I don't know how many other people might be not in the exact same position I'm in, but might have some problems either with their health or with health of the people that they're maybe living with or caring for. They have young children or even teenage kids. But so I had already signed up to go, and but now my doctors are saying for me not to go. So whichever way you go, just so that the whole group knows, it's not that I'm shying away. It's just that my doctor's telling me not to go to big groups of people like this. But I would definitely want to definitely listen to a keynote speaker, and obviously then going into a business meeting, especially if it was done virtually. So that's just a personal note. Sorry.
Oh, no need to be sorry. And thank you for, sharing that with us. Personal as it was, it's helpful information. Don, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I'm certain, Neil, that you and Sue and other people thought of this, but let's say on October 4th or whatever, we say we want to go there. And then the Delta virus, everything continues, and the governor or somebody comes out and says, no.
We just lost your audio, Don. Not getting any audio from you, Don.
My connection break down again?
Yeah, you're back now, though. Go ahead.
Okay. My question would be, and I'm sure you've thought of this, but let's say we go forward with a conference there on site, and things, as people get into the school year, a quarter of the school year or so, things are really bad in the schools. The governor comes out and says, okay, no more large group gatherings. It's getting cold weather. You can't have more than 50 people. Do we have a financial risk at that point that we've invested in and now we can't do it anyway?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
See, I think that some of this is way beyond our control, and I don't want to wish bad vibes, but what I'm seeing and hearing, I don't think this is going to get better. And as we move to cold weather, I think you're going to see more restrictions.
Thanks for that. Nancy, is your hand up from before, or did it go back up again? No, that's okay. No need to worry. We've all done it before. So folks, I mean, this is all very good information to feed back into this. So we'll continue to think this through, and if we come to a decision on it, obviously you guys will be one of the first to know what we end up doing on this. I think the challenge for me is that I know I don't know, to me, I think that there are very, very, very many valuable aspects of the conference, but one of the great things about it is to be able to get together with people and to just talk through things. And I was hoping to be able to do that this year, but certainly don't want to put anybody in a position that you have to compromise your health in order to be able to do that. So there are other items that maybe we need to take a look at, particularly around some, maybe the equity stuff and things like that, that we could provide different avenues or different venues for board members to get some information that normally we would have been handling in the annual conference. So all things that we're going to need to think about over the next, not even a month or so here as we head into the beginning of October. So thank you for that input. The other item of due business that we just wanted to bring up is that we do have a few board members that are no longer going to be with us after this next regional meeting series of elections. And the one who is actually, I'm looking at her right now because she's with us, is Judy. And I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Judy, Lori Childers. Mark is with us too, although I know he hasn't been able to share camera or anything like that. And Mark's in a little bit of a mute place where he's agreed to continue if we absolutely can't find another replacement, but I know that the timing for these meetings doesn't work well for him. But I just want to take a moment and say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Lori, for all of your service on the VSBA. I wish you well in your next career beyond the VSBA. But thank you for all of the service and work that you've provided us over the years.
I just wanted to thank everyone for making me feel welcome, and I've learned so much, and you've got a lot of really big, tough work ahead, and I know you'll do great for public ed. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. So applause to you and everyone else for all of the work that you've done. If there isn't any other new business, Mark, you're waving at me. You have new business or?
Just on a lighter note, I am very impressed with how empowering the CVU staff is to their students. And reading in Vermont Digger today that one of their students expressed how they felt was kind of interesting, and they're empowering their students. That's great stuff.
That photo got a lot of traction.
Our administrators are very proud. And board members.
Good. And not related, but if any of you guys were looking at Gaston's picture here in Zoom, I can see that the storm is coming. I see lightning flashes occurring in the background there. So for most of us, we will be looking for a rainstorm, I think, here shortly.
Yes, I'm having one right now. And actually, before we end, Neil, maybe Gaston wants to share his good news.
Oh, yes, please, if you're willing.
Sure. So I was accepted in the class of 2022 with the Vermont Leadership Institute. So that's run by the Snelling Center for Government. So I'm real excited. Starts in a couple of weeks. So it goes from September to June. So way excited. So yeah, great opportunity. Thanks.
Yeah, no, congratulations for that. And I can only imagine in another few years, we will be lobbying you, as you are a sitting member in either the Senate or the House in Vermont. So remember who your friends are, Gaston. Remember who your friends are as you get famous and you go places, okay? If there isn't any other items for new business, then I guess I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, I saw a hand from Gaston and a word. I saw a hand from Nancy, so I'll take that as the second. And then all those in favor of the motion, just wave goodbye. Thanks for joining tonight. Look at that, guys, 7:25. We did it. We did it again. Thank you.
Thank you.